Hello friends and welcome back. It's Morgana here today with another demonstration. This lovely dust painting that I'm calling Still Water Blue Heron. As you can see, I'm beginning today with my usual paper and a brief pencil outline, a simple line for the horizon, the sketch of a tree, a little bit of land, and of course our lovely heron. Just a simple sketch. And I've just put a little bit of masking tape along that line of the horizon just in order to keep it nice and clean while I put in my sky wash. I want a lovely smooth line between the water and the sky there. So you don't have to use tape, of course, if you're confident in your wash skills or in your horizontal line skills, but for safety's sake I usually tape off the horizon if I want a really nice clean line. And all I'm doing now is just wetting the sky ready for the colour. For this I'm using a small Princeton Neptune mottler brush. It's 1 inch wide, and I'm just using it to put in my first colour along the top here, which is Winsor Blue. And now pulling in a little bit of my second colour. I used Winsor Red mixed with a little of this lovely Winsor Blue to create this beautiful dusty purple colour. This really is simply a 2-colour painting. On my palette I've just mixed a little bit of the red with the blue to create this sort of lovely deep dusty purple, and I'm just layering it slowly into the sky there along the bottom third, just to start bringing in those beautiful sort of lilac coloured shades of dust into this painting. You can see that whilst the paper is still lovely and wet, I'm able to move the colour around a little bit with my brush, as long as I'm careful, keeping these nice horizontal strokes, nice clean strokes, and just working those colours together to get a lovely graduated effect. So now the next step for me is putting in a few wisps of cloud. To do this I'm using a slightly stronger mix of that same colour you can see that I've used at the bottom of the sky, this lovely soft dusk purple colour, and I've just put a little of it into a damp mop brush, and I'm just drifting that slowly across the page, just very lightly, using the tips of the brush to just put in these lovely sort of wistful lines of gentle cloud that you so often get in a beautiful dust setting. The key with this one is to not go in too heavily at the start. You can see I'm just building up a few layers here, putting in some darker purple across where I've already got the cloud, where I think it's not quite dark enough to stand up to the paint I've already got on the paper. It's easy to start light and then work a little darker, rather than coming in too heavily at the start and then suddenly thinking, oh my gosh, I've absolutely ruined it. Trust me, I have been there too many times. And this is the horizon line, the sort of a distant headland across the lake. Literally as simple as that, putting in one lovely straight line while the paint is still wet on the paper, using a really sort of dark purple colour to go with the sky. Again, I must reiterate that I'm only using 2 paints here. This purple dark was made with the Winsor blue and Winsor red mixed up together. And you can see that as I'm putting in these last few wisps of cloud, that lovely straight line for the horizon is starting to diffuse a little into the sky. Just got that lovely soft look that you often get if you're looking at a distant headland, where the distance makes it less sharp, you know, sort of almost misty effect. And there we are, peeling off that tape, very satisfying, that lovely clean line. I'm happy with my sky, so now I'm starting on the lake. You may notice that my paper is dry. What I've done to dry my sky nice and quickly so I can get on with my painting is just used a hairdryer, just a simple bog standard ordinary hairdryer to just dry the top of the paper so I can continue working. And all I'm doing again is using my brush to just wet the bottom third now of the paper where I'm going to put in my lake. You can see I'm being quite careful here. I don't want to get any water spreading up into the sky. If you get some water spreading over, you just wipe it up quickly with some tissue. I don't want any sort of crossover, sort of any cauliflowers forming, any sort of spillage looking. I really want that nice clean line to stay. So you can see I'm going to be very, very careful along that top line there, because I do have clumsy tendencies, so this requires some concentration for me. So you can see all I'm doing is taking a really, really light shade of blue, this lovely Winsor blue, diluted down quite heavily, and with a little bit of the red just poured in to get slightly pinky purple dusk tones. All I'm doing is just pulling it across the paper, and I'm leaving a little line, sorry, a little wine, no, I wish, a little line of almost white along that horizon, pulling the colour further down the paper, making it richer and darker the lower we get, just to get that beautiful optical effect of the brightening of the water the closer it gets to the horizon, that almost luminescent glow coming along the top of the lake there. And I'm just working in that colour until I'm satisfied. I'm not too worried about that spit of land. I just decided to let that beautiful lake colour dry. Again, I used my hairdryer for that. You can see it's nice and dry. I've blocked in the general shape of the land using just a slightly darker shade of blue. And now I'm coming in with a flat brush and starting to put in the darks and put in the details. You can see I'm getting some lovely use out of this flat brush here, using that sort of flat chiselled edge to pull some lovely straight lines out of this little spit of land here. getting those lovely lines in, a little bit of feathering on the shore of the lake, getting a little bit of detail and a little bit of texture into that landmass without worrying about it being too sharp or too detailed or having to spend far too long on it. Just getting a little bit of shading there, a little bit of texture just to make sure it doesn't look like one big blob. And now you can see, still using the flat brush, I've just turned it the other way so the flat point is sort of pointing up vertically, and whilst this paint is still wet, I'm throwing in a few quick sharp lines to just diffuse slowly and softly and become sort of background reeds and grasses. I'm doing this while the paint is still wet. I don't mind that the lines, you can see they're softening. As they dry, they're sort of blending a little more into the background. This is deliberate, as I'm going to go over them once the paper is dry with a finer brush and bring in some little details. This is just sort of setting up the idea of reeds before putting in the real ones. Now, happy with the little landmass for now, I'm turning my attention to this lovely big tree, and I'm starting with a simple round synthetic brush. I've mixed up a nice sort of deep shade of blue on my palette, just using a little of the red but not enough to turn it purple. Just want a nice sort of shadowed colour just to start bringing that lovely leaning trunk into the foreground. You can see as well that I'm not going in too dark straight away with the paint here, just putting it on in some careful layers, almost dry brushing around the trunk to maintain a little of that white, just to give a little bit of texture and a little bit of sparkle. And I'm just working my way carefully up the trunk, just brushing away, filling in where you can still see those faint pencil lines are. Making use of the pale colour that's behind the trunk to just leave a little bit of that glimmering through, using some careful dry brushing just to give that trunk a little bit of texture. Again, I don't want just one thick opaque line going up. I want this tree to look like it has a little bit of bark, a little bit of moss perhaps, a lovely little bit of texture on there. You can see I'm just following the lines here, using almost the same sort of sketching motion with my brush as I would with a pencil, to almost sketch in using paint these lines here, just to leave them nice and open so it's not too opaque and dark. Of course, you can always go in and darken them later, which is what I am planning to do. Put in a few darts just on one side or the other, just to give a little bit of light and a little bit of shade. If you go in too dark early on, it's very easy to make mistakes that is very difficult to undo. So I always advise starting off using your paler colour, and then going in, once you're happy with it, going in with the darts once you know where they need to go. And now I have the basics of that tree roughed in. I'm going to go in and feather in some branches later, but for now I wanted to show you how to put in this lovely heron. You can see I've already got the basic silhouette penciled in. The pencil line stayed strong enough through the wash that I can see what I'm doing now, just using a very, very fine paintbrush to begin putting in a little bit of shadow. This is quite a simple silhouette. The heron has got his back to us, he's facing the lake, looking contemplatively out over the water perhaps. So I'm beginning with a lovely sort of soft dusty mix again of this red and blue paint to put a purpley blue coat of feathers over his back. You can see I'm going quite slowly here, one stroke at a time, putting in colour quite carefully, just because he's quite small. And you know, one wrong brush stroke, you know, and this thing goes wrong. So it's important to use a fine detail brush here and to not be too heavy-handed. My brush here is a 000 miniature brush from Pro Arte. It's a very small synthetic brush. I love it dearly. I use it for almost all my sort of small bird work. Highly recommended. Just getting that lovely straight line for the beak in, and just a little, almost an S-shaped curve for the heron's neck. Now, as this is a blue heron, they have that wonderful deep sort of rich blue-grey colour on their wings, along their back, on the top of their head as well, but they also have a pale creamy white throat and underbelly, and just under their chin where their bill meets the feathers. So you can see I'm being quite careful with my paint. I'm not just blotting in the silhouette. Just for an added extra little bit of detail, I've put a darker line across the top of his head to mark out those dark feathers, and I'm leaving the little underbend of his throat pale colour, the nice pale colour we got from that glowing lake we've got there, just to give a little bit of extra detail. Obviously he's quite a small bird, we can't be too detailed. Too much detail would be wasted and would end up making it look muddy and not quite work as a silhouette. But a little bit of detail here I think really helps bring the heron into his own. And just a few gentle horizontal strokes into that lake just to give him a reflection. Now you can see here I've been filling in my tree. I'm just going to show you quickly how I do the branches. If you see my pencil sketch that I showed you right at the start of the video where I got the setup, I only had 3 sort of short branches roughed in because I knew that once it got to this part I sort of like to make it up as I go along. So I'm just putting in small sort of twiggy branches wherever I think that they look like they should go. So again I'm just using this very fine detail brush to just pull a few branches out of the main one, just sort of trying to follow natural lines and curves wherever possible. And for me this sort of thing has to be quite informal. I think natural growing things like trees and plants, if you make them all look too regimented, then they just look a bit strange. So I'm trying to be quite sort of spontaneous with my brush strokes here, but at the same time keeping them obviously within reason. I don't want to unbalance the painting by making the tree too big. And now all I'm doing using that same small brush is just using some quick fine strokes to throw in those extra reeds that I talked about earlier, just over the top of where I've put that shadow in there, so you get that effect of these sharp ones being in the foreground and the soft ones being a little way behind, perhaps where the eye doesn't quite focus on them properly. So I'm not going over the lines precisely, just over, sort of half over them, if if that makes sense. I want the sort of the diffused lines to peep through the sharp lines. And now you can see I'm finished with the reeds. I've added a few little extras along the bottom there using exactly the same technique as I've just showed you. And all I'm doing now is putting in a few extra birds. Just using those simple, gentle little V-shapes in the sky just to bring a little bit of extra life and a little bit of extra detail to that lovely sky we've just created. Again, using my fine brush, just varying the placement of the birds, varying the placement of their wings so they don't look too stilted or too artificial. You always get some birds flying around as dusk approaches. You get the gulls flying in from shore, you get the rooks and crows coming in to roost. So I thought it would be nice to pop a few extra little birds along that skyline there. And here we are with the finished painting. Thank you for watching, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed watching along with me. Please let me know if you liked it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this, then please feel free to check out my Patreon page, where more videos like this one will be available, as well as extra reference photos, outlines, and all sorts of bits and bobs. But yes, that's all from me today. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video, hopefully. So thank you very much, and goodbye for now, friends.